Inspired by real events, the 1582 escape of Tokugawa Ieyasu through Iga with the guidance of Hattori Hanzō, following the betrayal at Honnō-ji. In the sweltering days of June 1582, Japan teetered on the edge of chaos. Oda Nobunaga, the ambitious daimyo, feudal lord, who had clawed his way to near total dominance of the fractured land, took shelter in Honnō-ji Temple in Kyoto. Surrounded by retainers but unaware of the sword being drawn behind his back, he prepared for the next step in unifying the nation. At dawn, Akechi Mitsuhide, his trusted general, betrayed him. With ruthless precision, Mitsuhide's forces stormed the temple. Caught off guard and vastly outnumbered, Nobunaga realized escape was impossible. Rather than allow himself to fall into enemy hands, he performed seppuku, ritual suicide, amid flames and smoke. The shock echoed like thunder across Japan. Hundreds of miles away in the coastal city of Sakai, Tokugawa Ieyasu, another powerful daimyo and one of Nobunaga's closest allies, was traveling through hostile territory. He had been on a diplomatic visit, unaware of the tide turning against him. Now, with Nobunaga dead and Mitsuhide seizing Kyoto, the Tokugawa party was trapped, isolated in a region quickly aligning itself with the traitor. Ieyasu had no army, no warning, and no time. Panic broke out among his retainers. They debated surrender or suicide. Maps were unfurled. Faces turned pale. To return to Mikawa province, his homeland, meant crossing enemy-controlled land swarming with soldiers loyal to the Akechi. Then a voice spoke from the shadows. "We take the Iga route," said Hattori Hanzō. He stood still, calm, arms folded in his plain traveler's robe. His eyes, sharp and unreadable, studied the horizon. Some of the retainers scoffed. "That way lies death," one muttered. "The Iga mountains are impassable, and the locals don't trust outsiders." "They trust me," Hanzō said. A shinobi, covert agent, from the secretive Iga region, Hattori Hanzō was more than a spy. He was born in the mountains, raised among their misty trails, trained to disappear into the trees and strike like a hawk. Though employed by the Tokugawa clan, few knew his full capabilities. Even fewer trusted him fully. But now, with every road closed and every delay fatal, no one else offered a plan. Ieyasu stepped forward. "You can guide us." "I will get you home," Hanzō replied. "But we leave now." And so the decision was made. Dressed as rice traders and scholars, the Tokugawa party slipped out of Sakai under the cover of a summer storm. Hanzō led, silent and focused, while fear gnawed at the men behind him. They traveled light, spoke little, and moved quickly. Hanzō insisted on detours no one understood, through abandoned shrines, across flooded rice paddies, into dark thickets. One wrong step, and they'd be captured or worse. But Hanzō moved with certainty, as if the land whispered to him. Behind them, the shadow of Akechi Mitsuhide grew. The trader's men were sweeping the region, searching for the fleeing Tokugawa. Rewards were posted. Townsfolk were bribed. Assassins loomed. But Tokugawa Ieyasu did not falter. In the face of fear, he found resolve. "If we survive," he murmured to himself one night as he watched Hanzō crouch in the trees, scanning for threats, "I will never forget this." The mountains awaited. So began a journey that would shape the future of Japan. Rain soaked the road as the Tokugawa party followed Hattori Hanzō into the unknown. The decision to cross through Iga was not taken lightly. The region was infamous, not just for its rough terrain, but for its people. Iga was a land of shadows, steeped in mystery, guarded by dense forests and jagged ridges. It was the birthplace of shinobi, covert agents, warriors of silence and smoke, feared by samurai and peasants alike. Ieyasu had only heard whispers of Iga. He knew it as a place where clans vanished into the trees, where travelers disappeared without a trace. Few outsiders dared pass through. Fewer returned. Now, he staked his life on it. Hanzō led the way, barely speaking. He walked like a spirit, alert yet fluid, avoiding roads and staying low among the trees. Behind him, Ieyasu rode a thin, nervous mare. His retainers followed, dressed in plain robes, packs slung over their shoulders. They carried no banners, no clan colors. In the eyes of the world, they were nobody. The first night, they slept in an abandoned farmhouse hidden beneath a thicket of bamboo. Rain battered the roof. The air smelled of damp straw and fear. "We could have taken the Takedo road," grumbled Suganuma, a senior retainer. "It's wide, watched, safe." "Too obvious," Hanzō cut in. "Mitsuhide watches it. He'll expect that move. He will tighten his noose there." "But this?" another whispered. "How do we know these Iga shinobi won't turn us over for coin?" "They won't," Hanzō said. "They owe me. I owe you. That is the chain." That night, Ieyasu sat awake by the low glow of a lantern. The wind outside howled through broken shutters. He was a daimyo, used to palaces, to commands obeyed and enemies facing him across battlefields. Now, he was reduced to a fugitive, praying that shadows would not betray him. In the morning, the journey deepened. The trail narrowed. What little road remained was swallowed by vines and moss. They crossed rivers with improvised rafts, climbed steep ridges using ropes made from twisted hemp. Their boots slipped in the mud. Leeches clung to their ankles. Still, Hanzō pressed forward. At midday, he stopped suddenly, knelt, and ran his fingers across a patch of ground. Horse tracks. 4 riders. Not ours. Ieyasu's heart tightened. Akechi? Scouts, Hanzō confirmed. They passed here at dawn. He turned to the others. We split. Now. Into pairs. Rejoin at dusk near the 3 pines. Without argument, the retainers moved. Discipline held them together, barely. Hanzō guided Ieyasu through a side route, climbing through thick cedar groves. At one point, they crawled through a narrow fox tunnel, hands and knees scraping against cold earth. By dusk, the 3 pines stood tall against the horizon. All men returned. No one was followed. That night, they feasted on roots, dried fish, and boiled river water. It was meager, but Ieyasu said nothing. He watched Hanzō prepare a signal fire, thin, almost invisible, designed to be seen only from one direction. Are they coming for us? Ieyasu asked. They will, said Hanzō. But Iga is not just a place. It is a maze. We will use it. A moment of silence passed. The storm had slowed, and for a heartbeat, the forest seemed to breathe with them. Tell me, Ieyasu said, why do you help me? Hanzō's gaze didn't waver. Because without you, peace dies. You may not be a perfect man, Lord Ieyasu. But you are the only one left who can stop what's coming. The fire snapped. And in the dark heart of Iga, the true journey had only just begun. The Iga wilderness was alive with secrets. As the Tokugawa party pushed deeper into the mountainous heart of the province, they entered a world governed not by swords and laws, but by silence, deception, and trust measured in shadows. Hattori Hanzō moved ahead like mist on the wind. He used no maps, spoke no unnecessary words. He followed the signs that only a shinobi of Iga would know, knotted vines, etched bark, a feather tied to a branch. Every marker meant something: danger, safe house, watcher nearby. But Ieyasu's men were not of Iga. The deeper they went, the greater their unease. Why do we circle back? Asked Okubo, a veteran retainer. We passed this grove yesterday. Hanzō turned, eyes sharp. Because eyes passed here after we did. If we keep moving forward in a straight line, we walk into their blades. Suspicion lingered among the men. Iga was infamous for betrayal. And with Akechi Mitsuhide offering gold and titles for Ieyasu's head, even the most loyal heart could be tempted. To secure their path, Hanzō lit a coded signal fire on a ridge. The flame burned low, tinted green with crushed pine resin. Moments later, another fire responded across the valley, orange smoke curling upward. It was the sign of a safe route ahead. The true IGA still live, Hanzō said. They have not all been bought. That night, they reached a safe house, a hidden retreat built into the side of a slope, disguised by a curtain of vines. Inside, a lone woman waited. She wore traveler's clothes, but her posture was precise, her eyes unreadable. Said Hanzō. One of mine. She nodded to Ieyasu and offered food, wild herbs, rice, and tea boiled with bark. Not much, but clean and sustaining. Ieyasu bowed in gratitude. I owe you my life. I did not speak. She only returned the bow and vanished into the forest, leaving no trace. Before dawn, the group moved again. To mislead their enemies, Hanzō wove a tapestry of false trails. One retainer was ordered to spill rice down a hill, suggesting a panicked escape. Another left behind a torn sleeve and a broken sandal by a stream. In nearby villages, Hanzō's allies spread rumors that Ieyasu had fled north dressed as a monk. Meanwhile, the real party traveled south, through ravines where birds no longer sang and the trees grew so close they blocked the sky. Despite the precautions, Ieyasu remained tense. He was a lord, trained in battle and court, but not in fear. Sleep came only in fragments, and each shadow seemed a threat. Do you ever rest? He asked Hanzō. Rest is for when the path ends, Hanzō said without looking back. Still, Ieyasu began to watch his protector more closely. The way he blended into trees, how he moved without sound, how he read tracks like a scroll. Slowly, admiration replaced doubt. He moves like wind, Ieyasu whispered to himself one night. No wonder men fear him. In a clearing beneath a crescent moon, Hanzō called a halt. Tomorrow, he said, we cross into the deeper veins of Iga. After that, the enemy will grow bold. We must be faster, quieter. Fear will come for us. Let it pass. The group nodded, though unease still pressed into their bones. As the fire crackled low, Ieyasu gazed at the stars. He thought of his family, of Nobunaga, of what might become of the nation. But then he looked at Hanzō, who stood at the edge of the camp, eyes scanning the dark, hand resting on the hilt of his blade. In that moment, the daimyo understood something profound. He might be the man who ruled armies. But this shadow-born warrior would be the one to save him. The sun never fully rose over the Iga wilderness. Mists clung to the forest floor like clinging fingers, turning trees into looming ghosts. It was on the third day that Hattori Hanzō suddenly stopped, crouching beside a barely visible trail. He touched a patch of disturbed soil. Riders, he said grimly. 4 of them. Light horses. Not locals. The party fell silent. Akechi's scouts? Ieyasu asked. Hanzō nodded. They're tracking us. He didn't panic. Instead, he studied the trail like a puzzle. The hoofprints were fresh. A few hours at most. We can't outrun horses in this terrain, murmured Honda, another retainer. We'll be cornered. Hanzō disagreed. We won't run. We'll vanish. Within minutes, he crafted a plan. He gathered a small team of 3 retainers, including the fleet-footed Inoue. You'll take the decoy wagon, he said. Torch it, make noise, and head east through the gullies. Let them see you. And you? Inoue asked. We take the deer path west. The decoy wagon, a hastily modified cart filled with broken tools and sacks of straw, was set alight just as the mists began to lift. From a distant ridge, Hanzō and Ieyasu watched it jolt through the trees, flaming torches mounted on its sides, leaving a visible trail of smoke. Minutes later, faint shouts echoed through the valley. Hooves thundered in pursuit. The trap had been sprung. While Akechi's men gave chase to the decoy, the real party slipped into a stream bed hidden under a low overhang. Hanzō led them in silence, stepping from stone to avoid leaving prints. All day they moved west, keeping below the ridgelines, cutting through bamboo thickets. Once, they passed a shrine swallowed by ivy, its guardian statue cracked but still standing. Ieyasu paused and bowed, whispering a prayer under his breath. By nightfall, they reached the rendezvous point, a dry riverbank beside a crooked pine. Minutes later, the decoy team arrived, breathless but alive. They followed us into the ravine, Inoue reported. We doubled back through the waterfall trail. They won't find their way out until morning. Ieyasu, weary and soaked to the bone, could only nod. That night, the camp was hushed but hopeful. They had survived their first test. Still, Hanzō did not rest. He walked the perimeter, checked the trees for signs of watchers, and ran silent drills with the retainers. He insisted that each man learn basic shinobi hand signals and how to walk silently. This is not a battle, he said. It's a breath. Break rhythm, and you die. Ieyasu watched him from the shadows. He had led men into open battle, faced arrows and blades without fear. But this was different. This was war in silence, and the shinobi were its masters. In the morning, they found a string of feathers tied to a tree, a silent message from Hanzō's allies. He examined it and smiled faintly. The path ahead is clear. For now. They resumed their march, moving like whispers through the forest. Behind them, Akechi's scouts searched the wrong valleys, convinced they had nearly caught their prey. But in truth, they chased shadows. The rain returned with a vengeance. Sheets of it lashed the forest, turning the narrow trails into rivers of mud. Branches snapped under the weight of water, and thunder rolled like a war drum across the mountain peaks. But Hattori Hanzō pressed forward, unfazed. By now, the Tokugawa party had entered the most dangerous stretch of their journey, a jagged range of cliffs known by locals as the Dragon's Spine. The name came not from legend, but from appearance, a thin ridge curved like a serpent's back, its path just wide enough for one man to cross at a time. Below, the land dropped away into mist and roaring river. The only crossing was an old rope bridge strung between two cliffs, swaying in the storm. When the party reached it, they stopped. The planks were soaked, many broken. Ropes frayed and swung violently in the wind. It won't hold, muttered Okubo, stepping back. This is madness. Hanzō said nothing. He stepped forward and inspected the bridge. Then, without hesitation, he crouched low, tested the nearest rope with his weight, and began crawling across. Rain pounded his shoulders. Lightning split the sky behind him. He vanished into the fog. The men stared, frozen. Ieyasu dismounted and walked to the edge. He stared at the swaying ropes and swallowed hard. We must cross, he said. Now. He went second. Knees trembling, hands gripping soaked rope, he crawled after Hanzō. Each gust of wind shook the bridge like a leaf in a storm. The sound of the river below was deafening. But Hanzō's shape was there ahead of him, unmoving, waiting on the far side. One by one, the retainers followed. Some crawled. Others slid on their stomachs. No one dared look down. Behind them, the last man, a young courier named Matsuda, nearly lost his grip when a plank cracked under him. But Hanzō was already moving, throwing him a spare rope line tied to a nearby pine. Minutes later, soaked and shivering, the entire party reached the other side. No one spoke for a long time. The storm seemed to pause, as if offering a breath of silence in respect. Then Ieyasu stepped forward, dropped to one knee, and pressed his palm to the muddy earth. We live, he said softly. Because of you. Hanzō gave no reply. He was already scanning the path ahead, calculating the next danger. That night, they camped beneath an overhang, shielded from the wind. They wrapped themselves in damp cloaks, shared strips of dried meat and stared at the fire. One man said what all were thinking, we should be dead. But they weren't. Because where samurai faltered in the open, shinobi endured in the dark. Before sleep, Hanzō approached Ieyasu. There's more ahead, he warned. Ridges, rivers, and one village checkpoint before Iga's edge. Will it be worse than today? Ieyasu asked. Hanzo's expression didn't change. It always gets worse before it gets quiet. Then he vanished into the night, as he always did, like a whisper swallowed by the storm. Even the strongest men can be undone from within. The Tokugawa party had survived mountains, storms, and scouts, but now, suspicion stalked them like a wolf in tall grass. Supplies had dwindled to foraged roots and stale rice. Feet bled from torn sandals. Every shadow looked like a spy. And worst of all, trust began to fray. It began with a hawk. Early one morning, as the mist lifted off the trees, Hanzō spotted it, an unusual bird with a red ribbon tied to its leg, circling above the treetops. He followed its path to a nearby ridge and found it perched beside a hidden nest. Inside, a message scroll sealed with wax bearing a symbol unfamiliar to the Tokugawa. He returned to camp and said nothing at first. But that night, during a rest stop in a hollowed cedar grove, he quietly checked each retainer's belongings. In Kyumabe's pack, a junior officer often stationed at the rear, he found wax shavings and bits of crimson ribbon. Hanzō said nothing until the fire dimmed. Then he stood. Kyumabe, he said flatly, you've been signaling someone. The retainer froze. That's a lie. I saw your hawk. You have no proof. I have your seal wax. The men stood quickly, hands on hilts. Tension surged like a drawn bowstring. Even Ieyasu looked uncertain. What do we do? Whispered Inoue. Hanzō drew no weapon. Instead, he stepped forward and stared Kyumabe in the eyes. If you've sold us out, he said coldly, you've signed your own death sentence. But if there is still honor in you, walk away. Now. Kyumabe glanced at Ieyasu. Then he turned and fled into the trees. No one followed. Silence ruled the grove. Later, under moonlight, Hanzō followed Kyumabe's trail, alone. Hours passed. He returned just before dawn, his face unreadable, his blade unsheathed and stained with rain. He said nothing, and no one asked. But trust had to be rebuilt. And Hanzō knew fear alone was not enough to bind men together. That evening, he gathered the retainers. With no grand ceremony, he knelt before Ieyasu and unsheathed his short blade. I, Hattori Hanzō, born of Iga, sworn to the Tokugawa clan, pledge my life to your safety. If I fail, let my name be forgotten. Ieyasu looked at the kneeling shinobi, mud-slicked, quiet, and resolute. Then, moved by more than gratitude, he stepped forward and returned the bow. Then I, Tokugawa Ieyasu, swear I will not forget the name Hanzō. Nor what you have risked. One by one, the others joined in the vow. Hands clasped. Heads bowed. For the first time since the journey began, unity returned. The next day, they moved faster. Not because the roads were easier, but because now they moved as one. In every eye was fire. In every footstep, resolve. And in the shadows, Hanzō walked ahead, more than a guide. He was now the spine of the escape itself. The border of Iga lay just ahead, so close they could taste freedom. But danger thickened with each step. Patrols grew bolder. Villages whispered of new checkpoints. Akechi's spies tightened their web, aware now that Ieyasu was still alive and moving south. Hattori Hanzō knew they needed a new strategy. Stealth alone would not carry them the rest of the way. We vanish, he said one evening, crouched over a dirt map scratched with pine needles. Not in the forest. In plain sight. The retainers exchanged confused glances. A caravan, he explained. We disguise ourselves as monks and merchants. Ieyasu will be hidden inside a sake barrel. It was madness, and genius. The next day, Hanzō and two of his allies met with villagers sympathetic to the Tokugawa. They arranged carts, robes, and wooden barrels. A priest from the mountains lent them sutras and robes. Old merchants provided a pair of oxen and half-rotten bundles of wares to sell. At a remote village crossroads, the transformation began. Ieyasu, cloaked in a plain kimono and shorn of all rank, climbed into a dry barrel, lined with straw and rice dust. Air holes had been carved, but the space was tight. If this is what peace demands, he muttered, then let it be so. Hanzō sealed the lid himself. Outside, the caravan took form. Monks in saffron robes chanted prayers. One cart bore rice sacks, another vegetables, and one, the most humble, held the barrel. Akechi patrols awaited at the next checkpoint. A narrow pass overlooked by a crumbling watchtower. As the caravan approached, guards stepped forward. State your purpose, one barked. Hanzō, dressed as a wandering monk, bowed low. We carry offerings to the shrine at Mikawa. The storm drove us from the upper roads. The guards circled the carts. One poked at the vegetable barrels with a spear. Another sniffed at a sack of rice. When they neared the barrel holding Ieyasu, Hanzō stepped forward. That one holds fermented fish, he said. The smell is unholy. The guards sneered and waved them through. The caravan rolled on. Hanzō didn't relax. He kept pace on foot, eyes scanning the tree line, ears trained for the sound of galloping hooves. But the checkpoint faded into the mist behind them. Hours later, they reached a clearing where the party regrouped. The barrel was opened. Ieyasu emerged, soaked with sweat but alive. No cheers followed, only nods, brief smiles, and shared breaths of relief. The ghost caravan lives, one retainer whispered. From that day on, the tale of how Tokugawa Ieyasu passed enemy checkpoints hidden in a barrel would become legend. But for the men who lived it, it was not glory they remembered, it was the sheer, terrible risk of every moment. That night, they rested in a sacred grove marked with old runes. Hanzō stood guard with his back to the fire, sword resting across his knees. What now? Asked Inoue. Now, Hanzō said softly, we race the dawn. The dawn broke sharp and cold. Mikawa, Tokugawa Ieyasu's homeland, was just days away. But the hardest stretch remained. Ahead lay a narrow canyon known to locals as Yamaji no Kuchi, the mountain's mouth. Few paths led through it. Those who ventured unprepared often never returned. Hattori Hanzō, however, knew every stone and shadow of the trail. What he feared was not the land, but who waited within it. Akechi's men will expect us now, he told Ieyasu as they studied the valley from a high ridge. They know we didn't die in Iga. They'll tighten the net here. Indeed, signs of pursuit had returned, hoofprints on nearby trails, ash from fresh camps, and the occasional arrow planted deliberately as warning. Hanzō moved quickly. He chose a hidden trail only used by hunters and smugglers. It wound along a ravine, barely wide enough for a man to pass. Every bend was blind. Every slope, a trap. But Hanzō had prepared for this. Earlier, he had instructed villagers loyal to Tokugawa to rig the cliffs. Ropes were tied beneath boulders. Branches were cut and reset as triggers. If needed, the entire canyon wall could be turned into a deadly landslide. As the party entered the canyon, the air grew still. No birdsong. Only the crunch of boots on gravel and the steady drip of water from rocks. Then came the whistle. An arrow struck a tree inches from Inoue's head. More followed, raining from above. Akechi's scouts had found them. Ambush, someone shouted. Keep moving. Hanzō barked. Instead of turning to fight, he gave a sharp whistle, 2 rising notes. High above, villagers hidden in the cliffs pulled the prepared ropes. The earth groaned. Then came the roar. Rocks and debris tumbled down the slopes, crashing into the ravine, smashing against the narrow trail. Dust exploded in every direction. Cries rang out as the enemy line broke. Covered by the chaos, the Tokugawa party bolted through the remaining trail. They cut through a bamboo grove, the tall stalks shielding them as they weaved between trunks. Another group of enemy scouts appeared at the far end of the gorge, but too late. Hanzō led the party along a hidden streambed that split beneath a moss-covered rock. Moments later, they vanished into the forest. The enemy never found the turn. By dusk, the ridge overlooking Mikawa came into view. The sight of it, rolling fields, distant temples, familiar banners fluttering in the wind, brought Ieyasu to his knees. He wept, not from weakness, but from the sheer force of survival. "We are home," he whispered. Hanzō stood beside him, arms folded. "You did it," Ieyasu said. "No," Hanzō replied. "You endured it." The party descended into friendly territory under nightfall. Gates opened. Guards who had feared their lord dead dropped to their knees. Lanterns lit the road. After days of running, hiding, and bleeding, Tokugawa Ieyasu walked free again. But he didn't walk alone. Behind him stood the man who had guided him through a nation's throat, unseen, silent, lethal. And they both knew the journey had changed them forever. Mikawa's soil felt different beneath Tokugawa Ieyasu's feet, solid, rooted, real. After days of running through fog and peril, the safety of home felt almost like a dream. But the war was far from over. Akechi Mitsuhide still sat on the throne of a stolen Kyoto. Nobunaga was dead, and Japan was fractured. Yet Ieyasu now carried something more dangerous than any sword: he had survived. And his survival was a message. He and his party were escorted to Okazaki Castle under cover of night. No drums, no banners, only watchful eyes and whispered prayers. Inside the fortress, the retainers bathed, were fed, and given warm clothing. But Ieyasu could not rest. He sat in silence, staring into a brazier, the flames casting shadows across his face. Across from him stood Hattori Hanzō. "You should sleep," Hanzō said. "I will," Ieyasu replied. "But not yet. Not until I understand." "Understand what?" "How I'm alive." Hanzō didn't speak immediately. Then he sat on the floor, cross-legged, and answered. "Because you listened. Because you trusted the path. And because you never gave up." Silence followed. Then Ieyasu asked what had lingered in his heart since the escape began. "Why did you not abandon me?" Hanzō looked at the flame. "Because you are the only one left who can stop this land from bleeding itself dry." That night, Ieyasu slept. The next morning, messengers were sent. Letters to old allies, calls to arms, strategic responses to Akechi's betrayal. The escape through Iga had changed everything. Now, rumors spread like wildfire. The Tokugawa lives. He crossed Iga. He rides with ghosts. Some believed it. Some feared it. But all listened. Within weeks, Ieyasu allied with Hashiba Hideyoshi, Nobunaga's other great general. Hideyoshi moved swiftly, crushing Akechi Mitsuhide at the Battle of Yamazaki. Mitsuhide died after just 13 days in power. The traitor had ruled less than a fortnight. From the ashes of that chaos, a new order emerged. Slowly, deliberately, Ieyasu built his strength. He learned from Nobunaga's mistakes, from Hideyoshi's tactics, and from his own brush with death. Decades later, after Hideyoshi's death, Tokugawa Ieyasu would face the final test, defeating rival warlords at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. Victory crowned him. 3 years after that, in 1603, he was named shogun, Japan's supreme military ruler. He held the position briefly, then passed it to his son, ensuring stability. The Tokugawa shogunate would rule Japan for over 250 years. But none of that would have been possible if he had fallen on the mountain paths of Iga. If he had died in a sake barrel. If he had never trusted a man cloaked in shadows. A man who disappeared when the war ended, never asking for reward. Hattori Hanzō. Ieyasu never forgot. In Edo, what would become Tokyo, he ordered the construction of the Hanzō gate at his castle. And he entrusted the protection of his palace to the Iga warriors. Every shogun after him would pass through that gate. But only one knew why it was truly built. Only one remembered the man who walked through fire and mist to save a nation's future. History remembers Tokugawa Ieyasu. It remembers his victory at Sekigahara, his unification of Japan, and the centuries of peace that followed under the Tokugawa shogunate. Statues were raised in his honor. Shrines were built. His name etched into the memory of an empire. But there was another name, a name whispered, not carved. A name spoken only by those who walked in silence and swore by shadow. Hattori Hanzō. When the war ended, Hanzō did not seek title or land. He declined gold, denied promotion. He returned briefly to Edo, where Ieyasu entrusted him with a sacred duty, guarding the palace gates, protecting the Tokugawa line from the threats that blades could not always see. And then, one day, Hanzō was gone. No announcement. No farewell. Some say he returned to Iga, to live out his days in the mist-covered hills of his youth. Others say he became a monk, shedding his past in search of peace. A few believe he continued his work, hidden even in peace, guarding the shogun from threats that history never recorded. But those who served with him knew the truth: Hanzō was not meant for palaces or court titles. He was the edge of the night, the last breath before silence. His legend grew quietly. In Edo Castle, one gate was named in his honor, Hanzōmon. Behind it lived the elite of Iga, chosen by the Tokugawa to serve as their secret guard. The very same path he had used to bring Ieyasu home became sacred ground, studied and protected for generations. And among the shinobi, his name became a litmus test. A whisper to measure loyalty. Are you as silent as Hanzō? As true as Hanzō? The very shape of warfare changed because of him. He had not won battles with numbers or banners, but with misdirection, loyalty, and precision. He taught that strategy is not always forged with a blade, but often with patience, timing, and the right shadow at the right moment. And Ieyasu never forgot. In his private chambers, he kept a simple object, a length of rope, once used to cross the dragon's spine. Old and frayed, nearly rotted. To others, it was meaningless. To him, it was everything. A reminder of the escape that changed his fate. Of the man who made it possible. Centuries later, the name Hattori Hanzō still echoes, through films, through stories, through martial arts schools that claim his legacy. His image is distorted by myth, romanticized by fiction. But the core remains. A shinobi of Iga. A guardian of the Tokugawa. A ghost who saved a future. And though the world may forget the paths he walked, the forests remember. The mountains remember. The wind that moves through Iga's valley still whispers the name. Hanzō. Thank you for watching The Ninja Who Saved the Shogun. If you enjoyed this tale of loyalty, strategy, and survival, please subscribe for more historical legends brought to life. Until next time, walk in shadows, and honor the past.